esteemed viewers, welcome to your first agricultural TV station in the country, talking about the Agricultural Research Council of Nigerian Television. Welcome to the program Aqua Farming. Aqua Farming is a program that tells you all that is in the water. So we discuss basically everything that survives in the water. So it can be shrimps, it can be crabs, it can even be crocodiles, and everything, like I rightly said, that has to do with water. And today, of course, we'll be talking about one of the most popular aquatic animals in the water, talking about fish. If we talk about water, everyone is going to tailor it towards fish before others will actually come through. And talking about fish today is one of the most lucrative business today in the world, as a lot of people have gainfully gained employment as a result of fish farm. And today on the program, we'll be looking at the prerequisite you need to set up a proper fish farm. Fish farm encompasses different aspects and different things you need to put in place before you can venture into it. And a lot of people, to an extent, basically do not know what they need. It is sometimes when they are already in it before they start making provision for those things that are quite important to make the farm blossom as it ought to. It's more reason why on today's episode we'll be looking at all those things you need to must keep in place or put in place before you start your fish farming. And with me today, or rather on the program, we have to go all out to make sure we bring the best brains who have been in the practice of fish farming and aquaculture. And today with us in the studio is none other but our regular guest, Gabriel Wase, a fish scientist and also a consultant. You know what that means? Being a consultant in that aspect means he knows a lot. Gabriel, welcome on the show.
Thank you.
All right. In my introduction, I'll talk about the prerequisite. Of course, that's what we'll be looking at. Now, a lot of people are watching us to speak. And as a consultant, now, they're consulting you to let them know what they need to do to be able to start up a proper fish farm. Because to an extent, some people just assume if I have a space, I have water, I'm good to go, not knowing that there are some nitty-gritty that people need as a people. So go ahead now, can you explain to us what are the basic things that we need?
Okay, so when it comes to fish farming, the first thing that ought to be done is to decide for a site for which your farm is to be situated. That talks about the location of the farm. And it is quite crucial to ensure that the right location is selected, as that is going to be ensure success or failure of the farm. First of all, before you make a choice of a farm location, you need to consider what are the possible factors that will make you to succeed or not to succeed. And in the process of site selection, you need to understand that fish lives in water. So wherever you want to situate your farm, what is the possibility of having uninterrupted water supply all year round? It also boils back to what you have in mind, the intention, the mission, the vision behind the investment. Do you want to operate seasonally? Or do you want to depend on the rains? Or do you want to depend on maybe running water? And you want to produce all year round? So you need to decide if this is what you want to produce all year round, then there has to be constant supply of water all year round. So the situation of the farm should be located in a way where water is easily accessible. You know, there are some locations where even when you carry out a survey, you discover that it's difficult for you to get water. That is when you're planning to drill your boreholes, or when you want to depend on maybe natural water sources like the dams or the rivers or the springs. If they are not there, then that site is not suitable, because water is a medium through which fish is reared. So without water, and you cannot manage water when it comes to fish farming, you need to have it enough and at all times. Then another condition that ought to be met, apart from water, is the soil type. What type of soil is on the field? Is it sandy? Is it loam? Is it clay? What type of soil? If you want to go with earthen ponds, which are dug out ponds, then you will have to take that factor very seriously, because not all soils are suitable for dug out ponds. But if you want to go with concrete ponds, of course any soil can do. But if you are going with dug out ponds, then your choice of soil type should be clay loam, which is most suitable. Of course, if you have sandy soil, it is going to add to your construction cost if you still want to go with them, because there are ways we can still manipulate to get it done, but at higher cost. So you cannot select a soil type that is going to increase to your cost even from day one. So it is advisable that you make the right choice of selection of that site, and consideration should be given to the soil type. Then apart from that too, you need to consider the accessibility of that farm. You know that when you are counting on the cost of production, it starts from your capital investment to your operations up to the point your product is taken to the market. And of course, you understand that if your farm is unaccessible or does not have access roads, then again, there is difficulty of your customers coming in and out of your farm. There is also difficulty of you bringing in inputs onto the farm. There are so many challenges, and that means that while they are not surmountable, you can surmount them, but with added cost of production. So you ought to also situate or locate your farm in a place that is accessible, where you can easily move in your inputs and move out your products for sale. Then again, apart from that too, you also consider the vegetation and then the topography of the soil. The land that you want to situate your farm. Because it is a business, we are not farming for fun, but we are farming because we want to make profit. And as a result, you need to consider all these factors to ensure that you minimize the cost of production. Now again, if the topography is rough, if the land is not maybe sloping gently, you have hills, you have depressions, you have valleys on the same piece of land, it is equally going to add to the cost, because you have to do filling. You need to also, and again, if it has dense vegetation, heavy trees on the land, all of these are going to add to the cost of production, because you will need to clear them off, you will need to fill up the valleys, you need to flatten the soil before you go into the actual construction. So even before the construction of the farm proper, you have incurred additional costs which otherwise could be prevented. And all of this can be achieved if the right selection of site is achieved. So if you don't get it right from day one, then you are going to struggle. And that struggling means your profit will be going into cost. And not as if you are not successful, you are, but you made a mistake, an initial one, that has eaten deep into your investment, that it will take you time to recover. So site selection is key to the success of a farm. Of course, you understand that today the cost of providing power on our farms is the major issue we are battling with. And also, if your farm is situated in a place where there are no such basic amenities, there is no power, and perhaps you are depending on maybe running your generators, that too is going to eat deep into your pocket. And at the end of the day, the profit will not be there. And it's not as if you have not actually produced, but the cost of production was too high, and so maybe you had to run at a loss at the end of the day. So site selection is essential, and that is the beginning of it. So when you want to select your site, put into consideration all of these factors, and when you do that, the rest will be smooth for you. So when you are done selecting the site, after the site selection, the next thing for you to do is to clear the field. You clear the field, you remove all the grasses, the stumps, all forms of organic matter on the topsoil, and make it smooth enough for construction to begin. And soon after that, you will have to go into the actual construction. And before the construction takes place, you have to map out the various structures which you have planned. You need to, and for the ponds especially, you will need to take the dimensions of the pond, and then the actual excavation will take place. This is in the case of dug out ponds. And if it is concrete ponds, the markings, you map out the locations and the the dimensions of the ponds and then they are built. For in the case of the dugout ponds, after you clear the topsoil, you clear all the vegetation, then you dig out the ponds, you do the actual constructions, put in place all the inlets which supplies the water and also the outlets that drains the water. It is always good if and more economical if you use gravity flow to drain your ponds rather than having to use machines, pumping machines to pump out water. So that can be done if your pond bottom slopes gently. Of course, you know that in construction of your ponds, the depth of the pond is not supposed to be uniform at all points. While there's a deeper side, there should also be a shallow side, and that gives room for gravity flow. So from one end it is shallow, from the other end it is deeper, so that water drains by gravity, so you do not have to incur additional cost for pumping. So when the construction is completed, and of course when you do your construction, you need to also take into consideration the size of your ponds and then the volume of water to be supplied and also the volume of water to exit the pond. This has to be calculated, because if you don't, for instance, if you have a bigger pond and you're having an outlet or an inlet that is maybe 1 inch pipe or 2 inches, it's going to take you a whole day to fill up water, and you want to drain, it's taking you another whole day. So you need to know what volume of water are you expecting in your pond, how long will it take you to fill up the pond, how long will it also take you to drain the ponds. All of these have to be taken into consideration, because when you get it right from the construction, it is easier for you in the management aspect. So when the construction of the farm is completed, then the next thing for you to do is to cure your ponds or make them ready for stocking. So how do you cure your ponds? The curing of your ponds is quite a simple thing to do. For earthen ponds, as once you dig out the ponds, you fill them off with water. Of course, most times the first water you're going to pump into the ponds will drain completely after some time. Why? Because the soil is yet to be saturated. And so you pump in water again, it might go low. You have to step up again until the water in that area, the soil becomes saturated with water. Then it now holds the water steady. So once the water is at a level, at a desired level, then the next thing for you to do is you can get yourself maybe lime as a curing agent. You apply lime in the pond and you leave it for some time, maybe a week or 4 days, 5 days, a week, depending on how much time you have. And so the essence is for the lime, of course, lime has a lot of properties. Yes, it can serve as a buffer, it has buffering capacity. It can also clear, like it also helps in clearing the water. If the water is a bit moldy, it has such qualities to clear the water for it to be more transparent. And also, it can also get rid of some pathogenic organisms that may be in the pond. So you apply your lime in the pond and leave it for some time, maybe a week, and thereafter you see that the water, you can as well introduce this manure, little of it, not too much. And the essence of that is for you to ensure or accelerate primary productivity in the pond. Of course, you know that usually in earthen ponds especially, why fish does better is because of that additional food that you don't provide as a farmer, but they access in the water because of the primary productivity. So when you facilitate that by introducing manure into the pond becomes richer, because naturally photosynthetic activities are taking place in the pond water. There is primary productivity, that is the phytoplanktons are produced. The zooplanktons are in turn feeding on them to grow from that manure. So your pond becomes richer, making food available for the fish that you don't even know about. So you can also introduce the manure in your pond, and when you do that, there is primary productivity, and when you introduce your fish, it is easy for them to take off from there. So when you're done with the curing of ponds, the next thing that should be done is your stocking. So if you have prepared your seeds and they are ready for you to be stocked, then once you are done with the curing, then you can introduce your fishes at whatever stage you have, depending on your experience. You can introduce in fingerlings or juveniles or jumbo, as the case may be. So whichever, they can be introduced at that point, and then feeding continues at that point. But in all of this, I will always say that care has to be taken, because you might get it right from step 1 up to the 9th, and then the 10th one goes wrong. It becomes a problem for
wasted
you.
labor.
Yes. So that is why in all of this, while you are doing this, if you are a first timer, you are not experienced in the business, you should always have a guide. Someone who comes from time to time to check to see that there is compliance from laid down rules and then what is being practiced on the field. So once that is done, your results, good results, are certain. And then you continue with your feeding, which I always recommend at the early stages can be done 3 times a day depending on the weather. I've always emphasized on weather because it is a basis for which metabolic activities will take place. So breaking down or digestion of food, it happens in relation to temperature. So if the weather is bad, it might be difficult for them to access 3 times feeding a day. But when the weather is okay and the temperatures are high, 3 times is fine. So you have to monitor the weather and see. And again too, the best practice is for you to always calculate the quantity of feed to be consumed per week. So if you have calculated this week, the same quantity of food can be administered for 1 week, and at the end of that week you have to weigh them again and do a calculation again to know what quantity of feed will go in the next 1 week, and then you continue like that. But there again, even if you have calculated the quantity of feed to be consumed per day, and let's say assuming you got up to say 20 kg of feed is to be consumed in a day, it does not necessarily mean that every day the 20 kg will be exhausted. So that means that you still have to take caution while you feed, because sometimes they may respond more aggressively, and there are times they will not respond so aggressively because of weather changes. That is not to say they are ill or they are diseased or there is a problem. If the weather is normal and then the response to feed differs, that is why you have to monitor. Because during the period of feeding is an opportunity for you to monitor the behavior of your fish. If they are behaving abnormally, you begin to think what could be the problem. And so the first point of...
How do fish behave abnormally?
Yes, during feeding, you have to observe your fish. That is why manual feeding is quite important, because you know the behavior of your fish. When you drop your feed, there is an aggression that accompanies catfish when feeding. You see them are so aggressive, they are up to pick the feed. You see them swimming. Those who are satisfied will leave, they are dancing, they are playing on the water. But you will begin to see if there is a challenge on them. You drop your feet and they are so sluggish. They are not even responding. And maybe some are swimming erratically, upside down, scrubbing their skin on the walls of the pond, trying to look for something to, like scratching their own self-skin against the pond walls. So all of these are abnormal behavior. From feeding to their own response to the swimming, you will monitor. If you are an observant farmer, you will know. That is why somebody, I think just last week, somebody said he woke up and 90% of his fish were dead. And I said, no, it didn't just happen overnight. You did not pay attention when the signs came up. Because before anything happens to fish, they will always give you a signal that I'm not okay. It's just like a child crying without saying anything. The cry is letting you know something is wrong. So it's left for you to figure it out. So the abnormal behavior from fish is telling you that something is not right. And what is not right? You check your water, you check your feed, you check your management, and then you can be able to figure out what the problem could be. And then when it happens, if you see that the problem is not from feed, then you consider your water. You can carry out a total water change can maybe disinfect the holding facility.
Yeah.
If there is need for medication, you administer.
Okay.
But all of this has to be done under the instructions of an expert
Okay.
who knows better.
All right. All has to be done by the instruction of an expert who knows better. These are the words of none other but Gabriel Wase, fish scientist, and also a consultant where we're discussing prerequisite for setting up a proper fish pond. I'm sure you must have learned that. Let's go on a quick break. When we return, of course, we'll be talking more. Stay tuned. Many thanks for staying true on your first agricultural TV station. Of course, we've been discussing with none other but Gabriel Wase, a fish scientist and a consultant as well, where we're talking about the prerequisite for setting up a proper fish farm. And of course, he's really done justice to this. Now, welcome back from the break, Mr. Wase.
Thank you.
Well, before we went on that break, you really hammered on the all we need to know. So now I want to ask this question. We have the earthen pond, we have the plastic pond, and then we also have the trampoline pond as it is today. Which is the best to actually rear your fish? And can you just give us the differences between them? What happens to this fish when it's in earthen pond, and what happens to the one that in trampoline, and what happens, just maybe the advantages of running?
Yes. It's hard to say which is the best because they both apply in different situations. Many of our farmers are operating on rented spaces. So when you are operating on a rented space, you are constrained not to use a particular facility you may wish to go for. So each of them may be very vital depending on the situation the farmer finds his or herself in. However, in terms of performance, it has been seen over time from research and experience that earthen ponds are more productive than concrete and tarpaulin ponds.
Okay.
The reason is because the management technique applied to earthen ponds and the rest is not the same. The water need is also not the same. The food need also differs because there is natural productivity that happens in earthen ponds that does not happen in tarpaulin. Because of course in earthen pond, in a whole production cycle, you may have to change your water if you don't incur problems. Maybe a few times or not at all, depending on your
location.
stocking density, the size of the pond, number of fish therein. You may not even change water, or you may just change water once or twice. But in concrete and tarpaulin, your water change has to be periodic. You may have to be changing water maybe weekly or even 3-4 days, depending on how much fish you have in your pond. So it is easier to manage earthen ponds than tarpaulin ponds and concrete ponds. And again, like I've said, the primary productivity that takes place, the sunlight that hits on the surface of the water, there are aquatic plants in the water, they use that, they produce oxygen. So basically, you see oxygen, apart from the atmospheric oxygen that dissolves in water to become dissolved oxygen for the fish, the plants through the process of photosynthesis are also giving off oxygen which the fish is utilizing. there is also the growth of phytoplanktons and zooplanktons, both of which serve as food resources for your fish. So there is much more benefits that your fish derive from earthen ponds that you can't find in concrete and tarpaulin ponds. And of course, like, while you are changing the regular change of water in those concrete and tarpaulin, we obstruct any emergence. Maybe there were zooplanktons that were growing in the pond. You have already flushed them out because you have changed water over and over, but that doesn't happen in the earthen pond. So earthen pond is more advantageous, and that is why fish that is reared in earthen ponds does better than, if properly managed, than the one that is reared in concrete ponds and tarpaulin. So on the whole, the earthen ponds are more advantageous, but care has to be taken because I always advise farmers, when you want to use earthen ponds, try not to stock fingerlings. Stock juveniles, if possible, standard juveniles, because
that is those ones that are big grown.
Yes, they are big grown. At fingerling stage, there are still chances that some fish among the same peers will shoot higher than the others. That means there is going to be a difference among themselves. But if you are stocking at standard juveniles, sorting must have taken place. Earthen pond, especially bigger ones, the labor involved in the drainage and the sorting, is not every farmer that does it. Once the fish is in there, because of the labor involvement, sometimes they have to just leave them. But if you have sorted your fish at standard juvenile level or even jumbo, and you stock them, the chances of them outgrowing the rest is not very high. The growth difference is not going to be so high such that cannibalism will occur at a noticeable level. Of course, for catfish, cannibalism must always occur, but at a level that is not detrimental. But when you stock at fingerling stage, before they get to standard, there are 2 or 3 different growth sizes in the same pond, and then they start feeding on the others. And there is one thing common with catfish. You see, you are feeding them, but the bigger boys sometimes don't even respond because they know the rest can go and feed and come back and supply to them. That's what they do. So you are feeding, you rarely see the bigger ones coming up because
they will be feeding on the smaller ones.
They are somewhere. By the time the smaller ones come to take the feed and return, they become feed to the bigger ones. So for earthen ponds, it's always good to ensure that you grade your fish properly at an advanced stage before stocking them. And when you do that and manage properly, the results are always going to be impressive because of the nature of the pond.
Wow. How interesting. Anyways, it's good to still have you here on your first agricultural TV station. Of course, we've been discussing prerequisite for setting up a proper fish farm with Gabriel Wase, fish scientist and a consultant. Well, on that note, we come to the end of this episode of the program. See you same time, same station. I'm sure you must have learned one or two. Bye for now.